I said, in that course, what is it that you're teaching undergraduate students about benefits?
Mm-hmm.
Can we connect? I'd like to see what you actually teach on this. 2 slides, and it blew me away.
You're listening to Self-Funded, the podcast about making healthcare better together. Let's get to work.
So those reference-based pricing plans have really struggled in Texas because you have Baylor and these up here. Houston, you have Memorial, Christus, St. Luke's, and Kelsey-Seybold. Mm-hmm. But those are huge population centers. You go to an Austin or a San Antonio, it's dominated by Baylor Scott and White, which is a division of Baylor. So or whatever the appropriate business terminology is to associate that relationship. But what that's done is you take the 4 major population centers in the state, and you've basically said at no point can the majority of the population fundamentally access reference-based pricing because they have to start using these contracts or the negotiated rate or the fundamental cost-based price that the hospital decides to charge off of their charge master, which could be massively inflated or it could be, whatever. So the
problem I think most people have, whether you utilize reference-based pricing or some other reimbursement schedule, is that the price doesn't match the reality of what it actually costs to deliver that service. And when you start being able to leverage, hey, the cash price for this is X, which is 5 times less than what you're charging with your massive volume and discount model, then you go, well, what am I paying for at this point?
Right.
So I guess we're kind of probably starting, I assume. Yeah, we already started, but
sure,
we'll keep some of that. But my question for you then is, if reference-based pricing struggles in Texas, people are using that as a proxy to try to approximate, what is the appropriate price based on Medicare as the basis for it, plus a margin. How do we discover the right price in Texas that's actually fair for all stakeholders if we can't use reference-based pricing?
I mean, that's a really good question, but I think fundamentally we have to stop treating reference-based pricing or really the Medicare price as the gold standard.
Okay.
Because one of the things that we actually teach in the class, and as much as you can teach it without being like a Medicare expert, so I have a chart that shows the equation for a Medicare reimbursement. And there's things like wage index. There's things like, geographic, cost of living indexes. But even, that's not the basis of just the price. And inflation indexes, wage indexes, and geographic cost of living is all a economic determination of what increase in price or decrease in price there should be from some median standard that Medicare CMS sets for that service cost or anything therein. But what also gets factored into that is, okay, well, how much competition is there in that space by hospital systems, large provider groups, or individual providers? And to that point, how much inequity is there between how many services are being rendered by that hospital versus their competitors? And if there is a heavy weight, for example, on Baylor's performing more Medicare services than, Methodist or THR or whatever that is, they will take some of the payments that Baylor is owed and flow them over to the other hospitals in a form of offsetting to ensure, because part of what ends up happening is that they also take into account how much uninsured patient volume has come through there. And so I like the way that Mark Cuban puts it the most, where we've turned hospitals and providers into subprime lenders, right? They are sending out an ungodly amount of care that is not being appropriately reimbursed because the patient is either uninsured, so they have to write it off as charity care, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think that's about the best version of solving that problem as possible, short of the attempt by the ACA to make sure everybody had to be insured. But the flip side to that too is that insurance companies will then short pay those providers based on their services. Like, we were just looking through a contract in a UHC ASO, and they have a stipulation in there on overpayments that basically says we're not going to go if we overpay a bill, we're not going to go collect that back from that provider and then put it back into the plan fund. What we're going to do is we're going to short pay that provider for future services that are provided, so that we don't have to jack with it as much as on our payables side or from an accounting side. And then the provider just has to suffer through that cash flow issue on the basis of services provided, which makes no accommodation for any overhead that they have. So you combine uninsured with short payments and other various, payment factors like cash, time between service and when the payment's actually made. And you have this system where hospitals are constantly having to try to collect. And so balance billing has been such an issue because of that fact that they get those short payments. And then who else are they left to go collect it from?
Yeah.
The patient. And the patient may not have the money, so they may have to write that off as charity care in addition. So you have a really trumped up system where if we start using the Medicare-based price, or if we continue to use Medicare-based price as the reference that we're doing all of these claim negotiations off, we're still undercutting the hospitals fundamentally, because the Medicare price in and within itself is flawed because of the fact that they have, well, as a reference for the open market. I mean, not necessarily for Medicare, but as a reference for the open market, if we continue to use that, we're actually feeding to a degree that system that forces hospitals into a position where they have to subsidize all of those categories of care from the fully insured or general network market.
Pareto Health is the largest benefits captive in the United States. With nearly 3,000 captive members, $1.3 billion of stop-loss premium in force, and almost 1 million covered lives, no other benefits captive comes close to Pareto Health's scale. But it's not just about the numbers. Pareto Health is a mission-driven organization, and that mission has two distinct parts. Number one, to make self-insurance simple and more accessible for small to mid-sized employers. And number two, to arm them with the most powerful cost management tools on the market. So if you're an employer frustrated with your healthcare outcomes, or you're a benefits consultant looking for an alternative to the status quo, it's time to consider Pareto Health. Pareto Health, where employers come to do self-insurance right, to do it easily, and to do it at scale.
Well, that's just, so I know we're going to talk about the subject today of kind of education, especially in the college space. But this, I'm putting on my college hat for a second. And one of the terms I heard in my economics classes, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So you were talking about writing off charity care. Well, let's say we do have to do that to the tunes of perhaps millions of dollars a year. Well, that's going to have to be subsidized, like you said, elsewhere. So it's not just like free money that disappears in the system. The private sector has to make up for that shortfall.
Well, the private sector has to make up to it, but so does the public.
Yeah.
Because the public is the one that actually ends up funding a lot of that charity care, or at least be it in the form of write-offs or otherwise, or direct payments via Medicare, or the increase in value that they get from the overall annual adjustments and things of that nature.
Yeah. When I was having this a discussion, I wouldn't call it an argument with the doctor not too long ago, that we were talking about, healthcare as a human right. And sometimes we conflate health insurance and healthcare in the United States, and people will, Bernie's really proud of saying healthcare is a human right. But my pushback on that is, if I'm somebody that can't afford care, and you're a doctor that spent 15 years and paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to study and hone your skill and become a master at your trade, do I have a right to your labor just because I say healthcare is a human right? I'm forcing you to provide me care. Well, is that a fair kind of equation, right? I mean, you could voluntarily decide, I will give you free charity care. But as soon as we get to the point where we start enforcing, you must provide care to everybody for free, regardless of their ability to pay, you're now saying you have a right to another person's labor, which I actually disagree.
So this is a conversation I've actually had on multiple occasions with people of various political beliefs, and, wherever you fall on that spectrum, to me, it really fundamentally doesn't matter. Because before we can actually have that conversation, you have to dissociate the concept of health insurance versus health care.
Yeah, absolutely.
The conversation we just had, and the entire premise of the fact that these hospitals in an emergency situation absolutely must provide care. They absolutely must provide care, and they, to a degree, have to write it off if the appropriate applications and things like that are on income requirements and all the different stuff. And there's actually a sliding scale. It's not just if you're under this threshold, 100% gone. It actually ratchets up on a percentage basis, so that if you're under, I don't know what the numbers are offhand. Let's just say, for example, $100,000. If you make $100,000, you have to pay 85% of the bill, or 95%, or 100, or whatever it is. And then it slowly slides down that percentage scale as you get down.
Zero, right? Yeah.
But the reality is that in those situations, healthcare, the actual access of services, is 100% available to every single person in this country, bar none. What we end up talking about more often than not, in the way that the politicians have really bastardized the conversation, is by saying that healthcare equals health insurance.
Yes.
And access to health insurance is access to a payer system, having somebody else pay that, or the transfer of risk thereof.
Yeah.
So when we talk about that conversation, the point that you just made, which is fundamentally that.
Well, and I do want to differentiate emergency care because versus an elective procedure, like you don't have a right to come in and get a free knee surgery just because you say you want, which is an elective procedure.
Exactly.
There's
and
a
that's
difference
where people,
in like, hey, you come off the streets on a gurney because you just got in a car wreck, right?
And that's where people conflate the two the most is the elective aspect of these things. People see the cost of an elective orthopedic surgery at $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 and say, what the hell, it shouldn't cost that much. But then that takes us back to why they have to charge that much to begin with.
Yep.
Right. And the system thereof. So I think the more that we move away from Medicare as the fundamental base price, and frankly, going to give a quick shout out here, but the episode that you did with Emma Fox.
Yeah.
She talked about this to a degree. And I think the way that she put it was fundamentally one of the best ways that I've heard it said, which is that I don't think that giving the federal government the authority to manage the overall health insurance world is the solution. Because even if you're a big Bernie believer and you saw the proposal that he put out, which is probably the most comprehensive proposal that has been presented since, fundamentally Obamacare, or even if you go back to the days of Hillary Clinton's, attempt at reshuffling the system to a degree, even in that dynamic, the people that are going to be administering the plan in those proposals is not the federal government. It's not CMS. It's a third-party private contractor like a BUCA who has the administration system already built that is then going to continue to manage it. So we're not even changing the dynamic under these systems. We're just saying that it falls under the purview of the federal government. So I think she said it best, which is that you don't transfer the authority of managing health insurance as a whole or the delivery of care model as a whole to the federal government. But I do think that the federal government has to step in to a degree and do, and this is my personal opinion, two things, which is fundamentally find a way to benchmark or flatline similar to the Medicare price, but separate from that, what a cost of service should be for, every code that we have currently. Like if we're going to be forced to use the CPT code system, which is fundamentally flawed unto itself, but if we're going to use the CPT code system, or the DRG system, or whatever it is that you want to use that says these are what these services are, you have to associate a benchmark price to that and then create some sort of geographic index or cost of living index or whatever that is, inflation index, to monitor those prices so that reimbursement rates are controlled or at least somewhat regulated. The second thing to do is to fundamentally force all of the insurance companies, fully insured or otherwise, to become fiduciaries on the plan. Just like we have in the retirement plan space. Retirement plan space, the entire chain of delivery has some sort of fiduciary responsibility to the plan, be that the record keeper, be that the advisor, be that the plan participants, the plan sponsor. Everybody has some sort of role to play there. And there's limitations in certain aspects of what they're doing, what degree of fiduciary responsibility they have. But if you look at a United Health Group as an example, right? They have the insurance company, they have the PBM, they have the administration system, and to a degree, they own the doctors groups as well. So that is so much control over the actual cost system itself that if they don't have a fiduciary responsibility to the plan participant, but it's rather directly oriented towards the shareholder themselves, which is not to say that there's not good people in that organization trying to do good things, but by that same token, if they don't have that fundamental responsibility, then how are we ever supposed to bring some sort of civil litigation against that on an individual basis rather than just at a class action?
We limited the profit margin they can make to 15% on large group. That was supposed to solve it all, right?
Well, but you know what that did.
Obviously, I'm being facetious.
That just created the subsidiary system and the ownership of pharmacy benefit management and otherwise. But the point being that if we create if we say across the board, if you touch an employer-sponsored health plan or otherwise, you have a fiduciary responsibility to manage that. You have a responsibility to report, and you have zero control legally at the federal level over any aspect of data or process of claims management. Like you have to be able to, that has to be fully transparent. People talk about price transparency a lot. I think that's important. But we need process transparency. You have to show me and prove to me that what you're doing is what you're saying you're doing. And I have, and you have a fiduciary responsibility to interchange that data.
Well, it's like when you, going back to, since we're, again, the subject of the theme of class, I remember back in geometry, you couldn't just get the right answer in geometry. You had to show your work.
100%.
You had to prove that you got there the right way.
Prove to me that what you're doing is doing what you're saying you're going to do.
Yeah.
And this gets in, this is the fundamental premise of what PBM legislation is supposed to be aimed at right now, which is creating the transparency around trade secrets of how we negotiate pricing. Right, all of these things are trade secrets, but if we don't know what the price is from the manufacturer, how do I know that you're actually creating a discount? Right, you're just saying that you're giving me a discount, but then simultaneously there's these rebates that then lower the price even further. So how is that different from discounting?
Yeah,
and what is it that's what does that entire process look like?
But there's no relationship to value. Yeah, so there's no relationship to value. So like, let's use a purse example. I can go buy a decent purse for $100 for my wife, or if she wants the Louis Vuitton, that purse might be $4,000, right? Equivalent, perhaps, quality of purse, but there's a perceived difference in value that's being derived by carrying one versus the other, because this one signals aspirational wealth. This one's just a purse, right? But you have free market forces there allowing a person to make a decision voluntarily based on the price and their perceived value to choose between those two purses.
Right.
In this equation, if I go to a doctor, I don't know how to quantify the value of their skills or the outcome that which should be expected, nor do I even know the price. So I'm just at the mercy, completely blind, to go, well, this doctor's in network and then they have a rating of 4.7 out of 5 by some rating system.
Yeah.
And my neighbor said they're a good doctor, so I'm going to go to them. Meanwhile, that person might actually have really poor outcomes based on a benchmark and also be 4 or 5 times more expensive than somebody down the street. But I don't know any of that in that transaction. Therefore, I don't know how to choose properly based on value, and we're stuck. Then you retroactively get billed and find out the price afterwards.
Well, this is no different than the specialization of a construction market, right? If I have a bunch of subcontractors that are all welders, and I have no experience in welding, I have no concept of how electricity flows from point A to point B and how those bonds are created and what material or level of steel or rating thereof is then supposed to be used on this material versus that material. And I have a welder that comes in, or I'm getting bids from different welders on different rating systems, or for the project that I have them doing in my backyard, on whatever metal structure. How do I know which one is better? Like the field of medical practitioners, not only unto itself, the field of medicine is hyper specialized, but then you get into hyper specializations of something that is already hyper specialized. And how do I determine what degree of expertise that individual has in that specific area outside of what I'm just told by somebody else who went there, or by some arbitrary rating system that's either set up by an insurance company or that uses patient reviews? I mean, it's hard to say what is the appropriate value system. I can't tell what welder has more experience other than just what's presented to me, or by pictures of their work or the outcomes thereof. So,
but there's still, you have at least a reference point of what is a fair market rate per hour to pay a welder.
100%. And that's where that was going, is like at the very, so what do I use more often than not? Or what do people use more often than not in the context of subcontracting or contractors coming in and doing work on their home? It's the price, right? They get references from different individuals, and then they make price determinations on what makes sense. And so that's why I still think that price transparency and advocacy in that space is important. But unless there's also something that is then in the background fundamentally functioning to govern what the base level of that price, at least the median, or you might call it price level, is, to regulate that, to keep it from just arbitrarily self-inflating as other market factors like what we were talking about.
Well, the only point of disagreement I have to say is not so much regulated, but if we could have a fair and open system that at least says this is the median price for this service in this location, et cetera, then let the market decide how much margin on top of that is appropriate to go to one versus the other. Because that goes back to my kind of purse analogy, is if I know the average purse costs $50 on average, or that's the median price across all purchases or all purses, I can decide to pay more, again, because I perceive there's more value, but at least I have a starting point of what I believe a purse is supposed to be worth. We have none of that today. And so rather than then you get into things like rent controls, right? Well, like a government's dictating how much you can charge in rent, and a landlord can charge. What I'm hearing is some price controls in healthcare that the government might be dictating.
So I think it's less oriented around what I think what you're hearing me say is that the government should tell us what the price is.
Okay.
Right. What I think should be happening instead, and therefore limiting the margin and so on and so forth that a provider can provide. I fully agree. Free market outcomes are what the goal is, which is why we don't want the government to manage that.
Right.
What I think the government has to do is decide or regulate at least what is considered the base price. What is that median price in a specific market dynamic? And then the market can decide within those dynamics or within that geographic area, this provider group is better than that provider group based on perception or whatever other market factors determine that. So they're going to be able to charge more for that price. But at a certain point, what we really need is what constitutes price gouging within that. Like
that's all I'm saying is you should be able to validate why you're 50% more than that median. Just validate to me.
Right. Like why does Methodist get to charge 200% versus the outpatient facility? Right. If this is our median price and that they are charging a 200% in, multiple of whatever that median price is, there should be some degree of validation behind that.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. And if somebody feels, or a plan sponsor in particular feels, that they're being taken advantage of based on things just like size and overhead, then there should be some sort of recourse for them to argue against that. But that doesn't exist right now because the median price is fundamentally arbitrary, right? So there has to, and I don't know how you do that fundamentally. This is just thought process, right?
Like I don't know how you can. This is why we sit down for an hour and have coffee, so we get already here when you and I start recording.
But that fundamental baseline, where is that median? I don't think we can continue to use the Medicare price as that reference point because the Medicare price is also something that is subsequently used to subsidize uninsured care, which doesn't work when we're trying to also control that price from the insurance landscape. So if we create that median price point, determine what that is, adjust it for things like inflation, geographic cost of living, other things like that, and say, generally speaking, this should be the average price or the median price. And then people can choose for their own business purpose to create volume by undercutting that, which then creates competitive forces for people who are top shelf or premier or platinum or whatever it is that you want to charge, their premium for the high quality.
If you want to go to the Dallas Cowboys knee surgeon and you want to pay 4 times the market rate because it's the Dallas Cowboys knee surgeon, okay, you can do that. But the issue then becomes, well, if you're doing that, you're making that decision on an employer-sponsored plan, where ultimately that additional cost ends up being borne by the entire plan, and therefore premiums and rates go up subsequently the following years because of those poor choices, or a lot of people making those expensive choices. Well, then it's different than Kyle going there and making that decision under your own volition and covering the cost.
Right.
So now you have a third party and a fourth party kind of paying on your behalf, which means there's a responsibility that may be had to the rest of the population in that pool.
Well, and I think that you have what that system fundamentally does is less oriented around the relationship between the plan sponsor and the provider, but it changes the nature of the relationship between the third party payer and the provider, because then there's now a baseline for that negotiation to happen. It's not based purely off the financials of the hospital provider or the financial outcomes or goals for reimbursement that insurer fundamentally has. Like there is no valid line that they get to draw in the sand and say this is the Medicare price or the median price, because all of it's arbitrary. Right. It's all based on the largesse of a system or the desire for discounts on the other, or network factors and all this other crap. Versus if we create that baseline, I think it then gives a middle ground to then do testing on those reimbursement rates, combined with the fiduciary nature that we hopefully create between both of those parties to the patient. And through that outcome, we can then test whether or not there is price gouging, largesse or otherwise, on a case-by-case basis, rather than creating some universal standard that may not be fairly applied across the board based on things like expertise, skill, perceived value, or other free market factors that would then allow for the fluctuation therein.
Okay, I think we just solved it.
I think so too.
And this is the first time largesse has been said on my podcast, not only once, but twice in the same episode. So kudos to you.
Chronic health issues, surprise out-of-network medical bills, inflated medical and prescription drug prices. These issues cost self-insured employers hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Add to this the rising cost of care and potential for waste across the life of a claim, and it's clear that self-insured employers need innovative solutions that lower their health plan spend. At Valence, we've done just that, developed innovation that shifts the current paradigm. A complete and integrated ecosystem solution driven by data, one that manages and simplifies the complexity of medical claim costs. It is through analyzing millions of data points that we enable employers to realize and fuel cost-saving solutions. Valence experts come prepared from day one, targeting the fraction of claims that will drive the majority of health plan costs. That is how our team lives the Valence promise, engaging early and often for smarter, better, faster healthcare.
I feel like it's a good a breaking point just to kind of pivot, though, because I got us down this track, and I apologize for starting us down this track.
Listen,
but this is
we
the
can
shit,
go as deep in any subject that you want.
So this is the stuff that makes me get excited to have these type of conversations, and I hope a lot of people that listen to that kind of nerded out about what we just discussed, because this is the level of complexity that I seek to try to help solve in this industry, okay? But the reason we're here today, Kyle, and you were here previously on episode 120, I think was the number, and we went a lot into your background as a consultant, and we talked, various different subjects, but today we came back and said, hey, there's something that you're building that I think is really interesting to talk about. And honestly, over coffee, as you started digging into the creation of this curriculum, I go, how the hell has this never been created before? Like, it really begs the question.
It confuses
how,
the living hell
out of me. How have we been avoiding this as a curriculum? So why don't we start there? I mean, maybe refresh who you are real quick, but just a brief version. If they want to go back to listen to episode 120 and really dig into you there, they can, and then come back. But just real brief bio, and then let's get into this curriculum that you're building. Yeah.
Well, thanks again for having me on the show.
Dude.
This is always fun to nerd out on this kind of stuff too. I didn't anticipate getting into government regulation on claims control and fresh out the gate. But I am the vice president of employee benefits at Summit Financial Group. We're a mid-market brokerage that has a national presence. And we really focus on helping people in the self-funded space. Okay. And we do plenty of work in the fully insured space, trying to help smaller businesses craft their way out of it or start with programs that live in that space, and then hopefully try to transition them into a more stable financial structure using either level funded or self-funding wherever possible and reasonable.
Yeah, but then if you do have a 15 life group, right, you're constrained to a degree of how much consulting you can actually do.
Right.
And so it is what it is. There is a fully insured market that exists for spaces like that.
Absolutely. And I think that the fully insured market fundamentally does have a role to play in the success of the self-funded market, because otherwise we're forcing employers that do not have the financial stability, into structures that may not be safe for them to utilize.
Yeah, 100%. But so let's get into this idea, and I want to kind of get the genesis first before we get into like what you're actually teaching and where. But where was this discovery in your eyes that you go, oh man, there's a knowledge gap here, specifically within the folks that are responsible for benefits procurement for employers, the HR folks, right? Ultimately, is a lot of them, this falls on their plate. But how did you discover or uncover, hey, there's a general lack of education that precedes their role as an HR professional, and they don't necessarily realize or know how much benefits is going to be a big part of their job responsibility. So where did that come from?
So this really started just in my consulting practice. I mean, we spend every day in the brokerage and consulting community dealing with purchasers of insurance. And you start to find pretty early on that the more advanced the concept is, be it self-funding or partial self-funding or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, TPAs, or how these different pieces of the puzzle work, you find that more and more often you encounter individuals who you have to teach these things to, like on the fly. Yeah. And meetings that are oriented around reviewing marketing results or rates and prices are always dominated by the conversation of price.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not the best locale to try to educate a client on what these structures mean, because otherwise we'd spend 3-4 hours in a meeting, and nobody fundamentally has time for that during the day, right? Or the average meeting. Like, nobody's prepared for that kind of conversation. And so it has to take place over time. And you have to gradually educate your clients over that course of time. And so it kind of dawned on me maybe a year and a half ago, give or take, that why don't these people, who is supposed to be training these people? Like, is it the consulting market? Like, is it my market? Is it my role to, bring people up to the same level of understanding of insurance that they actually fundamentally need to have to know how these programs work and manage them? Or do they, and that then led up to another question, which was, should they have the same amount of knowledge, or should they be equipped with at least enough knowledge to know what the fundamental pieces are, what stop loss is, how to optimize those contracts, how you control claims, the payer system, and maybe the pharmacy benefit management. But fundamentally, most of those are created and crafted under contract. What questions do I ask my provider? What questions do I ask my consultant? What should I question amongst the options that are being presented to me? And through that self-philosophizing, I at the time was on the board and still am for the Texoma Total Rewards Association.
Okay.
And which used to be, we recently rebranded from the North Texas Compensation Association. And at the time, there was a guy on the board with me who was the professor or associate dean or head of the HR program at Tarleton State. And I had a question for him, and I asked him, just as we were talking about education and different things like that, I was like, out of curiosity, do you teach a total rewards class? He said, yeah, absolutely. That's one of the foundational classes that we have. I said, in that course, what is it that you're teaching undergraduate students about benefits? Because total rewards to me, and at least most of the market in the modern world, and it feels like, treats total rewards as a combination of compensation, benefits, and maybe various other things depending on the individual company. And so he said, well, it's really like 98% compensation, maybe 95. I was like, well, that doesn't make sense to me. Can we connect? I'd like to see what you actually teach on this. 2 slides. 2 slides of one was a list of statutory benefits that have to be offered, FICA, Medicare, Social Security, things like that, and what employers have to pay for that. And then the second slide was a list of the voluntary or employer-sponsored benefits, medical, dental, vision, so on and so forth. And it blew me away. Like I at least thought that there was going to be some sort of focus on the slides themselves related to how you structure these things, or maybe there would be some more content later on that was maybe less directed towards actual insurance program management, but overall benefit strategy. But there's really not. And I'm not calling out my friend there. It's more so just it took me by surprise, because I also found that the same was true for the human resources program at UNT.
Okay.
I've also found that it's true for the most part, from what I can tell. I haven't had the deepest levels of conversation with some of those professors there, that it's the same at SMU. And I have a friend that at another university on the East Coast that said much the same thing. And so it really kind of blew me away, because so many of the HR people in these organizations, as well as the CFOs, are so focused on the price and potential outcomes thereof, and making sure that deductibles and coinsurance are there, and that access is achieved via network status, or that all my employees' doctors are on this list. That has become the fundamental focus of the consulting market as well. And my competitors are so focused on making sure that all of these things are bundled up or put together in such a way that they achieve those goals, that they forget to actually take the time to do the necessary education of what the alternative options are. And so I decided to work with the professor at Tarleton to create a certificate program for HR and finance professionals to not only understand what the functional approach to employee benefits is, but what not only you can do in the self-funded market, but what the individual pieces are, what the contracts look like, how they can be optimized, how you engage in claims control, how you manage a pharmacy benefit manager. And then I also teach them how to manage a consultant from a consultant.
Right.
So from the perspective of a consultant, I tell them, hey, listen, these are what the things that are important to us, or that I've seen in the marketplace from my own competition. These are the questions you need to be asking your consultant. Like if one of your core goals, as an example, is to make sure that your consultant is not taking kickbacks or extra compensation from the various vendors in your self-funded plan. In your contract service agreement, where they're charging a consulting fee, but maybe taking $1 per script from the PBM, have you included that consulting fee, in the list of services that they're providing for that, includes not only pharmacy benefit program acquisition, but ongoing management, or has stipulations that no compensation may be taken from other things. And then are you auditing those things? Are you auditing your plans? Or how do you go about that? Do you need to be the person to do it? Or can you just take a few simple contractual lines of language with that consultant contract and say that it's their responsibility to do it and you have the right to demand reporting?
Yeah, but like what you're describing, and I don't disagree with you whatsoever, but if I've got 2 slides in a class and it lists medical how in the world am I ever going to know to even ask a question like that, right?
Exactly.
In the modern world, right? And so I would say contrast the two ends of the spectrum. You that's dedicated a career that's a decade plus to really digging in and fully fleshing all these things out. Person that's studying human resources because they want to be a human resources manager, and they hear the word medical on a slide and maybe didn't even pay attention, and then they get into the job role. Those are opposite ends of the spectrum,
Right.
of course.
So it's really funny you say that, because there's a professor at UNT named Maria Aguilar, who is a fantastic HR mind and great teacher, who was gracious enough to allow me to come speak to one of her classes on the subject of benefits and teach them more about the various types of plans and things that they'll have to engage with. And before I got there a little bit early, and before she walked in, there was maybe 20, 30 students. I had all of them, identify themselves as, what side of the HR house do you want to be on? Do you want to be in internal, HR strategy, management, culture management, or do you want to be more on like the recruiting side or talent management and things like that? And so they all raised their hands and identified themselves. I was like, who wants to be in benefits, like internal benefits or external, like with a brokerage or otherwise? And not one of them raised their hand, which didn't surprise me. But
they probably didn't raise their hand because have they even contemplated that that's going to be part of their job responsibility?
Well, and that's the next question that I asked them. I said, who of you thinks that you're going to have to deal with benefits based on your what side of the house you've aligned yourself with? And maybe 2 out of 30 raised their hand. And I immediately, like, that's when it fully hit me.
Therein lies the problem.
Fully hit me that not one of them realized that every single one of them, regardless of what side of the house they go on, is going to be involved in benefits in some shape, way, or form. If you're in talent recruiting, acquisition, management, okay, well, you have to be able to communicate the benefits to the person that's going to bring you, or that you're trying to bring into the organization. And then if you're on the strategic management side, you're going to be the HR professional that is invariably, at some point in your career as you advance throughout the ladder chain of HR, going to be asked to start making decisions on benefit programs or deploying those programs, communicating those programs, or you're going to get shuffled into the benefit manager role, right? And so all of those things then became apparent to them as we started to go through this, and we drew those lines. But it has become very apparent to me over the last decade that HR people are not appropriately trained. They're being asked to make decisions that they fundamentally don't always know how to make in the best light from a long-term strategic management perspective. And they're being asked by financial professionals to make decisions on the basis of price. And that, or potentially just access. And while both of those things are absolutely crucial, if you want to create a benefits program that my industry loves to say attracts and retains top talent, it has to be more than just an insurance program. It has to be cultural. It has to take it to that next step. It has to create long-term financial goals that allow that plan to have a long-term threshold where you don't change providers or carriers every other year or even every year, just for the purposes of making sure that the employee can afford it. If you want to make sure the employee can afford it and maintain their access, you have to do something different. And it's not like we're asking people to do fringe strategies. And this is something that I notice a lot from the people who come onto this podcast and from people who even share the same ethos as me. It's like we all market self-funding as doing something different, as doing something like that goes against the grain. 67% of employer plans are self-funded. This is not something that's fringe. Furthermore, self-funding is not new. Self-funding has been around for 500 years, 200 years, 300 years. I mean, how old is Lloyd's of London? Like that is the first form of self-insurance. We are paying X to get Y, and if there's underwriting profits, we get a share. Right. And that's the fundamental principle, right? Like, this is not new. This is something that we just need to do a better job educating the basics.
But like you said, it's not new, but yet for the most part, everybody's getting the training and education on the job rather than preceding getting to the job, right?
$220 billion in medical debt is currently burying 41% of Americans. That is why, when faced with a serious illness, most people are first concerned with the cost of care, and second is the actual disease itself. There are people that want to help, Our mission at the Samaritan Fund program is to connect those facing serious illnesses to the financial support they need, relieving the financial burden and providing what they need most, the peace of mind to heal. For employers, that means lower healthcare costs, while also providing employees with much-needed assistance. With tens of millions of dollars sourced to people in need and approximately $1 billion in savings for employers, the Samaritan Fund program is delivering on our mission. But we're just getting started. SamaritanFundProgram.com. Learn more and reach out today.
And so that begs the question, I mean, you'll have to speculate. Was it a function of they didn't know to teach it, or there weren't people well-versed enough to go and teach it, so therefore we avoided the subject? Which do you think it is? It's got to be the latter, right? Where there wasn't somebody that said, hey, I'm going to pick up the mantle and say, I'm going to go now teach the next generation why they should care about self-insurance.
I think that that is a fact.
Because if it's so prevalent, then clearly we know it exists, but nobody said, I'm going to take the onus to go teach people why they should care and need to be educated on this subject. You just go figure it out while you're on the job over the course of years.
Yeah.
But you probably make a lot of mistakes and bad buying decisions leading up to being comfortable enough around alternative funding.
I think that has something to do with it, but I actually think that the answer is much more historical in nature. I think that the medical plans of the modern world, the fully insured plans that cropped up in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and continued to evolve, and the indemnity plans that they were modeled after, did such a good job of controlling the employee cost or the individual person's cost. And because pick anybody over the age of 50, they're going to tell you how much they used to love their insurance plan that had a $500 deductible and they didn't have to pay for anything. And it was cheap for them to do. Right. All of those things then contributed to this dynamic where it's like, oh, well, maybe we don't need to self-insure. It might be cheaper and it was less risky. Stop loss contracts back then were also extremely disadvantageous. If I had $1 million claim, I had to pay that and then wait 6 months to get reimbursed after the adjudication. Like, not many people could actually afford that kind of dynamic, particularly once modern medicine, and that's something we forget too, is that modern medicine advances have been so astronomical in the last 70 years that what was possible to cover has now radically changed as well. And so I think as that dynamic continued to become pervasive, the fully insured market captured the hearts of employers and the hearts of the employees because it was so simple.
Well, it's a great value proposition.
It really
Don't
is.
think about it. Here's what you have to pay. You don't have to worry about it beyond that. And next year we'll come back and tell you what the increase is. And it's usually it used to be modest increases, if any, right?
And so as a result, that then created this ethos in the HR and finance world, which basically said, well, we don't necessarily need to know the finer points because this has become something that we can understand at the surface level and that we can, to some degree, account for and predict. And then the consultant world, who was still doing some of these things with larger employers, became so hyper-specialized in certain areas that then that education or that knowledge transfer ceased. And so now we're in a dynamic where most of the HR professionals that come into the role or are promoted into that role or dropped into that role or parachuted into the benefits department to manage these self-funded plans are getting OTJ training. It's not usually fully adequate, or it takes them as long as it took me, as an example, just being a consultant to create that degree of mastery. But they don't need that level of mastery. What they need is mastery over the management of the program, right? It's not about understanding the finer points of underwriting or understanding how you actually in the background organize, company ABC to control this claim or create this contract. I mean, if you want to learn that, that's great, right? But for the most part, you need to know how to manage consultant, make sure that contracts are compliant and not disadvantageous to you, the employer, that you own your data 100% as a result of those contracts, and that you have the right to audit anything and everything and reclaim dollars that should not have been spent. Like if you can do those four or five things well, and then have a consultant that will back you up on that, and that you have made sure that your agreement with them holds them to that provision, then you're going to have a successful experience.
Well, that's so like what we're talking about. Let's kind of work this out. You're elevating the level of question asking that an HR director is to a consultant. which then is elevating the standard that the consultant has to rise to match their requirements. And then by extension, elevates the standard that the vendors have to meet the needs of those two stakeholders. And now everybody gets better as a result.
100%.
But if this person on the basis, this HR director is not asking the right questions, nobody else is held to a high standard. And so you get, let's call them disadvantageous, to use that word again, programs that are put in place that the employees are then at the mercy.
100%.
And then you start having you ask the question, well, why is my cost going up 15, 25, 30% year over year? But my only opportunity to improve or lower that cost trend is to worsen the benefits that I offer my employees. And now I'm stuck in this sort of negative feedback loop that eventually gets to a terrible plan that costs a whole lot of money. And I lose my job maybe as a result of that.
Well, and then there's I think it has a trickle-down effect across the market. But regardless, I think that there's plenty of good consultants out there that are doing really good things to not only educate their individual clients, but I created this program with the intention of trying to educate the market and try to get people the opportunity to use an accredited certificate program that they get to put on their resume so that it's worth the time that they're spending in there beyond just getting the knowledge. But then to also make sure that knowledge transfer doesn't just rely on the consultant to bring it to the client, but could also be institutionalized within the client themselves, where that HR professional or that finance professional who takes my class can then transfer that knowledge downstream, to the people that follow them or their understudies or their, direct reports that are helping them execute these things, right? And by default, we'll start creating a better employer market that has the knowledge to be able to say, why is this contractual provision in there? Why does it say that I have to get permission from a data team to get what I want? Like, I own this. You can't take that from me. And if you try, I'm going to go find somebody else who will give me that authority. Or I get to go back to my consultant and say, hey, this is unacceptable. You need to find me somebody better.
Well, tell me about the curriculum structure. I'm really curious. So, like, how many classes? How is it structured today? Is it an accreditation? Like, give me some of the technical stuff. Yeah.
So currently we have all of the class or the program is run through Tarleton State University.
Okay.
We're hoping to also expand it to SMU. And then we just recorded all of these classes with the Human Resources Network, which is a division of Business Professionals Network, and ACPEN. So big SHRM and HRCI reaccreditation organization. So that people can take it there as well as participate in the actual class. The Tarleton State it's 6 classes. Let's just start there. There's 6 classes that we'll do from like 6 to 8 on a Tuesday night or for 6 weeks straight. It's not organized to be full of tests or quizzes or readings and things like that. I have external materials that I'll bring in, but it's really just a lecture series that's designed to teach people, create a community of HR professionals that meet each other in these classrooms, give them people that they can then bounce ideas off of as well to make, or say, hey, like, I'm thinking that this is what I'm seeing in this contract, or this is what I'm seeing in my claims. Like, what are you guys doing to control these things? Or they can reach out to me or their consultant or whoever else. But once they finish that course, you get a officially accredited certificate from the university that goes on a transcript with the university. It lives in their records that you can put on your resume that says, I have a certificate in strategic medical benefits planning. Right. So as a HR or a finance professional that invariably is going to have to deal with these benefit programs in some shape, way, or form, in my mind at least, and we're only in our 2nd cohort right now, but in my mind at least, that is a huge thing that you could put on your resume that makes you attractive to that CHRO who wants to be focused on culture and strategy and talent and doesn't want to have to jack around with benefits and is already outsourcing that to the rest of their team so that they can stay at the high level, let somebody else, they want to make decisions, they want to be a part of it, but they don't want to deal with the ongoing program management. They don't want to have to be the person that sits down and reads through those contracts. So if I have somebody on my team who's trained on how to do that, then that, in my mind, is a bonus or a attractive trait for an applicant that's looking for a director of HR position.
Well, especially,
or a benefits manager
you need something,
position.
Something to differentiate your skill set, even slightly, right? So I can think of a corollary, the Certified Self-Funded Specialist sort of accreditation. Got that a few years ago. And I like the program. It's kind of ERISA heavy, lots of TPA kind of stuff. Some of it translated in the real world. Some of it was just more academic. But just by putting that acronym on my profile, I found immediately, if you like filter by that acronym on LinkedIn, you go from like hundreds of pages of people in the industry to 2 pages of people in the industry, right? So like you look at the subtle thing that differentiates to say, I've been trained on this thing. And so if a recruiter or somebody was looking for this very niche specific skill set, now you have something that stands out, right? Because you've been trained on a specific element of
so many of the accreditations or certifications or letters that you can get after your name in that world are either SHRM, HRCI, or they're benefit professional specific, but not even just benefit professional specific on like the HR side or the company side. It's all for the consultants. Okay. And it's all for our market mainly. Like there's good things that people can take and gain value out of, but like the intricacies of a TPA are not something that the HR person's going to ever really find a lot of value out of from like an educational perspective. It is extremely valuable for the benefit consultant or their account manager who's actually tasked with managing those individual components. So I designed this class to be specific for the HR and finance professional. I wanted to teach them not only the functional approach to employee benefits, so that's a good segue. So the 6 courses, the first one is all about the functional approach to employee benefits, which is something that you'll learn in the deeper, finer points of in the CEBS material. Okay. Certified Employee Benefit Specialist. Yep. So in that course, one of the first things they talk about is what the functional approach is. And it's functionally a proactive, crafting of your benefits program and treating it as compensation. Okay. It's not just a bonus. It's not a bone. It's not, something you're doing just to attract people because you have to, because the modern market, if you don't have one, you're not going to get an employee to respond to your job post. It is a form of compensation that is designed to protect the employee's salary. Average American doesn't have $2,000 in the bank. They get a $10,000, out-of-pocket max bill from a hospital. That can be life-altering for them and their financial future. Or a $30,000 bill. If I have these things without medical insurance or some sort of lower cap or a way to cap those exposures on a $200,000 bill, that could be life-altering for that employee, and they will stop working for me as a result. So I'm creating a financial protection for them by giving them these programs. And that in and within itself takes insurance away from just being a product that we have to offer or a benefit we have to offer to attract talent and become something that we use to maintain or keep them there. Yeah. Because we are giving it's a culture tool. It's like, I'm not giving you this just because I have to. I'm giving you this so that you are not at risk of ending up in a car accident that puts you in the hospital for 3 weeks that then bankrupts you for life. Right. So all of those things become salient, and furthermore, like a retirement plan. It's not something that you just have to offer so that somebody can retire or give the employee those options so that they have an opportunity to retire. It's about giving them a chance at long-term wealth creation that lives within your organization and doesn't require a financial advisor or a certain threshold human flourishing of salary. 100%. Yeah. And that's what these programs are designed for. Like, we buy car insurance to transfer the risk and protect our financial selves and situation and our savings and checking accounts or our 401ks even from a $30,000 replacement of an engine or whatever it is that we're having to do to that vehicle that's totaled or buy a new car. All of those things insurance is not just some financial scam or scheme or otherwise. It's designed to protect your financial life. And so if we as employers are going to give those things, not only do we need to start treating them like those things and communicate them as those things, but craft our benefits plans based on things like the various demographic cohorts that we have within our organization. What's important to them? How do we craft the message to them? How do we communicate those messages? How do we train our managers to make sure that if we have a direct contracting program or we have some sort of sourcing program and somebody needs to go out for a surgery, are they trained on how to direct that employee to those things? If my manager, like, nobody's going to come to the HR professional at a 1,000-life company and say, hey, I need 2 days off for a surgery. They're going to go to their manager first. And that manager should be trained on how to communicate the benefits that are ingrained in that. Again, we don't have to turn them into the expert that knows the self-funding TPA or otherwise. It's just, hey, remind your employees that if they need to go out for a surgery, they should look at this program because they could get it for free. And that becomes a culture tool that drives culture that says, not only does my company care enough to have this program, but my manager cares enough to intervene to try to save me that money. Right? All of those things become a valuable touch point in that functional approach to employee benefits. So that's the first segment. The second class is all about the history of health plans, how we got to where we are, and what the fundamental core differences between the various kinds of medical insurance plans are. What's a MEC plan? What's a fully insured plan? What's an indemnity plan? What's a self-funded plan, a level-funded plan, a partially self-funded plan? Just the core basics. That then leads to a more ingrained differential of what fully insured and self-funded plans are. What are those core components? The third segment is all about, which I'm actually teaching tonight for the second cohort.
Really? Okay.
Is all about the TPA and the core components of the self-funded plan, like more in depth. Like, what are these things? What are their roles beyond just these high-level things? And what are some of the things that you can do to optimize those programs? The fourth unit is exclusively about stop loss. Talks all about the different contract terms that you can include in there. What's advancement? What's accommodation? What is a 1212? What is TLO? What are these things that you need to make sure are included contractually to ensure that you're not on the hook for a $2 million claim either before or after the plan or during the plan? Like, somebody needs to front that so you don't have to go into the operations account. Like, how do you risk manage from a stop loss perspective?
Well, I don't see an invite on my calendar to come help teach that stuff.
Well, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You are there in spirit because the ag spec video you made for self-funded sketchbook.
Yeah.
We watched that video in that class.
All right.
And then,
so that was 4. So that's the in-depth stop loss components.
And then the fifth one is all about claims, pharmacy benefit management and claims management. So understanding PBM history, how we got to where we are, how to manage those, things to look out for, what point solutions are. And then the sixth one takes it a step further and says, not only are these how you do those things, how you do claims management, but how do you get your broker to help you? How do you manage their compensation? How do they get compensated? And then how do you optimize your relationship with that consultant so that you have the right to hold them accountable throughout that entire process?
Well, so I know it's obviously relatively nascent, like you started this last year, but are you starting to see like this is clicking with them and being well received? I assume that was the case, right? Yes. But it's like, does it take a little bit of effort to get them open to some of these concepts and get them to rationalize them and understand them? Or is it like they're just thirsty to have this kind of information?
Many of the people that join are thirsty for the knowledge to understand it. And I was telling you this at coffee, but I legitimately thought that when I started this program and we started marketing it and we got a few people in it for the first cohort, and that everybody in there, maybe there'd be a self-funded employer somewhere in there, but that for the most part, it would all be people in fully insured programs or level funded programs that were looking to take that next step. It was the complete opposite. Every single employer in that group was self-funded and it completely validated the reason that I started the class, because every single one of them had been parachuted into that role after their superior who built the program left. They didn't have enough training. They were doing OTJ. They were relying on a consultant that wasn't really being fully forthcoming in various aspects, and said, I need help understanding this. This is perfect. I wonder if I can learn what I need to learn from
I can imagine as an HR professional that didn't have the background and inherits the management of a self-funded plan, just trying to catch up, right? That's an unenviable position to be in, to try to figure it out. So I'm sure you were a godsend to them and people in that situation.
Well, I don't want to call myself that, but by that and take too much credit, because they were fantastic students and they really did understand some of these core principles pretty well. But it was really the optimization of the contracts, because we give them, and I show them real world examples. I de-identify contracts and de-identify different things and show them different contractual provisions or languages, or language that's used, or provisions that are offered, like a premium rebate credit, where you sacrifice your rebates in order to get this credit off your administration. So it looks nice on the front end, but then you get,
how much do you give up on the back end?
$100,000 in rebate credits, but you give up $400,000 in rebates. So all of those things become relevant. So they were actually fantastic. They soaked it all up like a sponge. And I've gotten some notes from several of them that they've already been able to change some of the programs. And one of them has even ousted their consultant and found a new one.
Is that new one named Kyle Minick by any chance?
I hope so. I hope so soon.
I'm not going to lie. That's not a pretty decent prospecting tool as well.
Well,
But
so that's the idea fundamentally is that we want to give them those tools so that they can then go back and look at their programs and say, are these things
is
in
my
there?
consultant meeting the
Is my consultant meeting the standard? Are these vendors doing these, core things? My goal is not to turn these people into the next Kyle Minick. My goal is not to turn them into a Spencer Smith who we understand the ins and outs of all of these different pieces to the absolute, molecular level. It's to get them to say, what do I need to know as an HR professional to be able to hold these people accountable, make sure my company's not getting screwed, and that this program is actually aimed at creating lowest net cost or lowest net price for my employees, so that we can use this as a culture tool and communicate these things appropriately to employees, and then leverage that out in the talent and recruiting market.
$27,000, the price of a new sedan. And in 2026, it's also the annual price of family health insurance premiums. We often talk about rising healthcare costs. The question is, what can we do about it? It's time to move beyond the traditional approach and take control of healthcare costs by considering an alternative health plan. With over 1,000 clients nationwide, Imagine 360 is a leading alternative health plan delivering direct contracts with top health systems and providers, reference-based pricing for fair, predictable costs, concierge member support, a fully transparent PBM, and third-party administrative services. And Imagine 360 is revolutionizing what reference-based pricing means today. They offer a comprehensive, transparent, and cost-controlled health plan. Most importantly, with average savings of 15 to 30% and a 98% member satisfaction score, Imagine 360 helps organizations reinvest in their business and their people. So if you're a broker seeking a differentiated solution or an employer ready to offer richer benefits at a lower price, contact Imagine 360 today.
So what do you perceive the evolution of this program will be, right? So obviously expansion into other schools would be ideal, but you only have so many hours in the day that you can go teach, right? Or so many nights a week that you could conceivably teach. So how do you evolve this program to have the net impact that you're wanting to have it at scale versus right now we're starting with a couple different colleges once a semester, 6 weeks, right? To have the impact that you're probably wanting to have, you've got to be able to expand this thing, right? So how do you envision doing that?
Well, it's something that I've been wrestling with because I'm not sure how to fundamentally go about it yet. But, my idea or my ideal world is that there would be a professor or two who would be willing to take up the mantle, help me create like a semester long curriculum that they could then incorporate into the human resources management program. Frankly, my hope would be that it becomes one of the core pieces of curriculum for human resources professionals. And even, if
I would suggest this should be a degree.
Well, I think that's where ideally it would end up going, but the degree program would have to be oriented, I think, less towards HR professionals and more towards people who want to enter our world.
Fair.
Because I don't know that.
But why couldn't an HR professional get a minor in managing benefits?
I don't think there's any reason why they shouldn't be able to. But full-blown degree would be something I think that's more industry specific to us. But which I'm not against either, frankly. But that's what I would like. I would also hope or there would be another avenue that I think would be kind of cool, which would to turn this into almost a SHRM like or HRCI like accreditation that an HR professional could obtain. That says that not only SHRM and HRCI are telling everybody that I'm a talented HR professional. I know the regulatory landscape of HR. I know how to attract and talent or recruit people, and I know how to drive culture, right? And there's other things, but that just as an example. My hope would be that we could create some sort of similar accreditation that then says, or some letters that go after somebody's name that then say, I have that, but I'm also an absolute benefits expert. I can manage these programs, I can deploy these programs, and I can use them to attract and retain top talent. I know how to manage consultant relationships. I can take this off the CFO's plate, deliver the best-in-class solution, and then make a financial argument for why that is the best solution.
And what do you think the downstream impact of this is? Let's say you're able to scale it, whether it's through content, living content that's like sort of permanent that people can access, or you've created a network of other folks that can teach this around the country, teach the curriculum, or et cetera. What do you think the net impact is to the HR space as a result of your content proliferating?
Well, my hope is that because a lot of these larger companies have benefit manager roles that are a part of the total rewards division or total rewards professionals that do various aspects of different things. My hope is that it has a positive impact on them and helps them to also understand that, communicating benefits and what the value of that they are as compensation goes well beyond just doing a total reward statement that shows how much we contributed to your benefits, right? It's about delivering that message in the cultural arena as much as it is in the financial arena for that employee. But furthermore, I also hope that it helps those benefit managers start to carve out a more, I don't want to necessarily use the word meaningful, but for a lack of a better term, a more meaningful role in the overall HR management. It's not about just making sure that people are enrolled and unenrolled or that claims are paid on time and all of these things, that they then have a role and a say in that cultural deployment of what these things can be. Yeah. Right. And how they engage with employees to communicate those things. And then furthermore, I also hope that eventually, if I'm in an HR program and I see that not only do I have the opportunity to potentially take this class or get this minor in benefits, but there's a full-blown SHRM level, accreditation that I can get that sets me apart from a specialization perspective, that then encourages younger people to not only participate in the benefits arena on the HR side, but on our side as well, so that they can then see that there are full-blown career pathways in that space. You can do good things to help real people within their organization and understand that this isn't just about driving profit or getting money, which is important, and we want those things. And, I'm a free market capitalist. Everybody needs to get paid. But by that same token, the actions that we take in those spaces positively affect people in the American population, and that we have a say in how these systems operate, rather than just relying on a buca to manage everything for us and then getting upset when it doesn't go the way we want it.
Well, so let's say people have listened and they go, man, I'm really interested in participating, in being a student, if you will. How do they go about that? How do they find out the information? How do they sign up, et cetera?
So the Tarleton website obviously has its own page for the class and the accreditation. We try to market it.
And what did you call the class?
Strategic Medical Benefits Planning and Administration.
Strategic
workshop in that title because it's a mouthful.
Minick Clinic. Remember I told you at the beginning,
Minick Clinic.
Let's do the Minick
I don't
Clinic.
know that communicates the ethos of the course, but we'll maybe we can figure that out. But through Tarleton, we're also advertising it through North Texas SHRM. Okay. And then also I'm advertising it through various channels and things like that. And our hope is to also get some of the other universities to adopt the program and have SHRM themselves start to proliferate. And I'm assuming
there's a cost associated with it, right?
Okay, but it's extremely inexpensive. We're only charging about $300 for the entire accreditation.
And I have no doubt these people can likely write this off as or charge it. It's an educational expense, of course. Yeah. I'm sure your employer would pay for it if you wanted to sign up for Kyle's class. And then do you have a limitation on the number of folks that could attend a cohort?
No. Okay. Right now we're doing them all virtually because people from all over because people from all over the country are taking it. My hope would be to eventually have an in-person version of that. Yeah. Because I really like to whiteboard.
In-person's awesome.
I really like to whiteboard.
You and me both.
But by that same token, you got to meet people where they are. So when we first rolled out the class, it was in person.
Could this conceivably be done? Could this be done over a weekend too, like a workshop intensive, like 6 hours on a Saturday and a Sunday, and you're done, kind of thing?
Yeah, we could absolutely do that, but again, that requires the in-person component.
Some demand.
And demand has to already be pre-existing, and right now we're still just rolling the virtual courses so that we can do that. My hope is that we can get this program into SMU by the spring. Okay. And I think that would make it, how centrally located SMU is comparative to Tarleton that's down in Stephenville, it's a lot easier for people to potentially go there in person. So we'll see how it all plans out.
But I mean, I applaud you, for doing this. I mean, I'm sort of a teacher at heart as well, and I'm glad to see that that's something that you've embraced. Your knowledge needs to be transferred to other people. And I think it's a gift that you get to give the marketplace. And I do think that you're filling a void, similar to how I felt whiteboarding stop loss insurance 6 years ago was filling a void that existed in the market and finding out, hey, there was actually demand for that information. I think you're going to find out there's a lot of demand for the information that you can provide people.
Well, and I would love somebody like or organization like SHRM to pick it up and run with it, or because there's plenty of excellent professionals in SHRM that know what I know. Maybe not on certain specificities or whatever, but it's certainly at the level that they could knowledge transfer that. I mean, there's plenty of CHROs and directors of HR out there that are masters of self-insurance. I look at somebody like Stephanie Koch, she would be ideal.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Or somebody at that level of knowledge of what these programs look like, and they would be able to take it and run with it. Absolutely. But, or like the Validation Institute or something along those lines that are offering some of these things. But I think SHRM would be the ideal candidate because they're the ones that are constantly trying to, they are the body of professionals that are constantly trying to manage this. I also think that, and frankly, this is, my own, ignorance on display, but I don't really know if there's an organization like that for CFOs where they can all gather together or have some sort of accrediting body that would allow them to understand, is this actually risky? Because so many times with financial professionals, which is why I include them in that, that saying.
Yeah, the only one I can think of is FEI.
Yeah,
maybe someone to that effect.
I don't.
But I don't know how much they get into benefits or have outside speakers.
There's so much that a financial professional has to be aware of, but I think the key thing for them is just at the bare minimum understanding that the modern market of stop loss eliminates so much risk that's already in there, right? Like you don't have to front these $2 million claims anymore,
right?
Like that your operations account is not at stake anymore, right? If you structure your contract correctly, have the appropriate amount of tail or run in or whatever it is that you need, you're never going to be on the hook, even if you leave the program.
Yep.
Right? Like you can deal with these things, but you have to be aware of how that operates first at the bare minimum. So I think as time progresses, we'll see if the financial professionals actually find a lot of good value from the course.
I think they should, because I think I'm seeing more and more that the responsibility of an alternative funding program being chosen as the right way to fund your plan is a financial decision.
Right. Absolutely.
And we're not talking about a spreadsheet decision necessarily, but there are financial implications at stake. Yeah. These are plans with multi-million-dollar exposure. And so it has to involve the finance person.
Well, and I was telling you too that I've always liked the way that Chris Hamilton, who I've seen on this show many times, presents it, which is like, this is a business unit. And this is a business unit that is the second largest line item of expense that you have behind payroll, and it is the least managed under the sun. And you want to tell me that you don't have a responsibility to do something in that vein? I don't know. It's not. It's just something that I hope that eventually they will come at the minimum, and it might have to be more oriented around the actual risk components or the financial components to be more valuable to them versus understanding all the back end, because it's not them who's going to manage it. It's the HR person that's going to manage it in tandem with a consultant. But by that same token, I mean, they need to have a better understanding.
Well, I'll give you a very specific real world use case. And, obviously our sales process includes a discussion with the employer. And we perceive our job is to educate the market so that therefore a percentage of them will say this captive program is the right thing for me. And so we're having a conversation and I was trying to explain stop loss to a CFO and he goes, oh, that's like reinsurance, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, it is. I mean, it is fundamentally reinsurance. That's what you're doing.
Well, now.
Yeah, I know. I know the semantics, and I've argued against these semantics many a time.
Oh, I think they're so pointless.
But anyways, that was the way that he could connect and go, oh, now I understand it. There's a threshold of risk, and anything above that risk, I reinsure to a stop loss carrier.
Yeah.
Cool. He was good to go. And then the only other question he had to ask was, well, all right, how do I budget for this? How do I fund this? What do we charge our employees? Like, he wanted to get his head wrapped around contributions. Those two things were the important things for him during that hour-long conversation. The rest of it evolved around like how the benefits program worked and was more HR focused. But as soon as he checked those boxes and had those questions answered, he was like, I'm good. We're good to go. This is what we want to do. And so I do think both of those stakeholders and our Our desire is those stakeholders, usually even the CEO, if it's a smaller business, is on that call. They're all represented. All of their concerns are addressed. Their voices are heard. And this is not a decision that's made in a vacuum. I think you need both, at least HR and finance, to be involved in that conversation. 100%. If you exclude one, you're going to set yourself up for, I would say, long-term.
Well, in the decision-making process, they absolutely need to be there. I just think that from an education perspective, the finance professional might want a more condensed version.
Yeah, well, I just described the two things that guy cared about, right? You're absolutely
just to say,
right.
like, this is what the risk actually is. This is how you deal with it, and this is what this means ongoing financially.
Yeah.
Like, I think theirs could probably be one segment or a 2-hour session.
And he's like, then you guys talk about deductibles and co-insurance and stuff. Yeah, I guess. Well, Kyle, I think the long and short of this is I hope to get some attention your way for this cohort. Obviously, I think the easiest thing to do is if somebody's interested in discussing it with you, just hit you up on LinkedIn. We'll make sure to tag you and make you available and promote this thing as well. But
and Sherm.
In Sherm, Sherm, if you're listening,
this is a great opportunity to educate your members.
We're talking to you. Yeah. Sherm, hit Kyle up as well. But I wish you success, man. I think our industry needs this. And again, I just kudos to you for actually taking the onus to go do it. A lot of times people will talk about things and have great ideas, but you've actually put it forth in motion. And I just hope that it grows to the level and the extent that you hope it does.
Well, I really appreciate it. And I hope it does too. And really, I hope, if nothing else, that it has a positive impact on our marketplace and forces my competition to do better, which if they don't, then I'll keep taking business from them. But by that same token, the actions of my market have a real impact on the financial lives of Americans.
And so of our entire economy.
And yeah, absolutely. And so we have a responsibility, I think, to do better. And if there's ways that we can educate our clients and the HR community at large on how they can hold them to a higher standard, then I would be honored to be a part of that.
Cool. Well, sounds like a great place to finish. And now we get to shoot last month in healthcare, man. So thanks for sticking around for that.
Absolutely.
Appreciate everybody listening. Go find Kyle and take his class. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.